Welcome to the Friendzy.
I'm Melissa Carter.
And I'm Jenn Hobby.
And here is our promise to you. The Friendzy is here to change the conversation around age
so that you can celebrate all your years rather than lie about them.
Real stories connecting real women. I'm Melissa Carter, and I, as a child, had a phobia of vomiting. I mean, a real phobia of vomiting. And I think that I'm number 9 on the Enneagram.
Oh, I can't wait for this. Okay, I'm so excited. My name is Jenn Hobby, and I think I missed my calling as a professional organizer. And I think that I'm a 1 on the Enneagram.
Really?
Here we go.
So coming up on today's episode, I don't know if you've caught the clue yet or not, but Jenn and I are going to explore the Enneagram, which is an ancient personality type system. Now, every time I hear the word ancient, now this is age because we're doing, the Friendzy, but remember the ancient Chinese secret? Remember that commercial? Do you remember this, Jenn? Or maybe it's just ladies in their 50s and 60s. But every time I forgot, it was some detergent or something. So you didn't have to send stuff to the dry cleaners. And so the commercial had, of course, it wouldn't fly today because it's an Asian couple who was speaking very, in Asian stereotypical dialect. But she was using this detergent in her dry cleaning store. And so somebody asked her, "What's your secret?" And she said, "How do you do it?" And she's like, "Oh, ancient Chinese secret." And so
oh my gosh. So every time we say it's an ancient personality type system, you think of that commercial.
I do. Enneagram is an ancient personality type system. I don't do Asian, stereotype. Anyway, we'll have to put a link to that old commercial just to bring back some memories. Sorry about that. I went down a rabbit hole.
Sometimes things like that can be triggering for sure. Well, Melissa and I both enjoy self-discovery, and really, who doesn't, right? I mean, I was taking those quizzes in 17 magazine as a kid, right? And the Enneagram was a suggestion by one of our listeners. So we want to say a big thank you to Lauren Goins, who suggested this to us. She said, as a request for an episode, I'd love to hear you explore the Enneagram. Have you ever looked into it? She said, it's been a very helpful tool for navigating relationships. And, Melissa and I had both heard a lot about the Enneagram from friends. I had listened to other podcasts about it and authors about this being interviewed. And you and I both thought it was pretty interesting. So we took it as a sign that we should dive in.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we did is we both chose to read the same book, so that we could be on the same page here, literally. And it's called The Road Back to You. I'm putting the camera here on YouTube. The Road Back to You, which is by Ian Morgan Cron and Suzanne Stabile.
And so we want to say thanks again to Lauren for suggesting this. She said to try to answer the questions on gut instinct and not from the lens of the many hats you wear as a mom. So I thought that's really great advice. She says Enneagram gets to our core desires and fears. So it's important to answer as your core self without the responsibilities that we have on us at the present moment. So, Lauren, thank you for the suggestion. And for sending us down this path, because I have learned so much.
Well, Lauren, I followed Lauren's advice because it was very difficult. And we'll talk about this, where I had a hard time narrowing down a number because I found that there was a part of me that was one number and part of me that was another number. And I went with the most vulnerable and the most personal, not the mask that I wear, whether it's a mom or as a professional.
Okay. Well, coming up on this episode, we're going to do our best to capture a description of these different personality types. So you might be interested to go and read more and find your own. And we're also going to explore our own numbers and how we can be more compassionate and aware for one another in order to strengthen our friendship, because this is the Friendzy after all.
That's exactly right. So have you subscribed to the Friendzy podcast yet? It is absolutely free. And you can subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. We're on every platform. So we also want you to tell a friend about the Friendzy. We would appreciate that very much. And we love being able to share these real stories to connect real women.
Melissa, let's dive into the Enneagram in just a minute. But first, let's thank our sponsor.
Kick it. Pajamas. We're creating our own theme song for them.
Yes, we are. And if you use the code Friendzy, you'll get a 10% discount. It is perfect for your friend battling cancer. Okay, so let's dive into our Enneagram journey.
Yes.
Melissa Carter, you're up first. What
right.
do you think is your Enneagram number? And did it jump out for you right away?
I've got my little bookmark in here. All right. So it did and didn't. So
Okay.
this book, for those who, and we'll explain later about the numbers, because there are, how many numbers, Jen, are there total?
There
Maybe
are
10?
9.
Nine total.
Mhm.
And basically what you do is you go through and you look at the description and see which one fits you the best. And so there are a few that are based in anger. Okay. Anger and gut triad is what it's called. I mean, it goes into depth and all this. And I have to admit that I am an anger based person, and that may be surprising to some.
Yeah.
Jen and I've talked about this before. I have, I talk about have a short fuse, but there's a part of me that has had a lot of anger and resentment at my core from how I grew up. And it's, and in the Enneagram, I think kind of brings that to light, where it's the subconscious things that you absorb. It's not, I did not have an abusive home. I didn't have abusive parents. I had parents who told me they loved me every day. And I had a mother I was very close to. But I had siblings that were much older than me. I've mentioned before how I was the oops baby, so there were things that I was subconsciously absorbing in that environment. Especially when I was my son's age. He's about 6, or he is 6, but I was about 6. And my siblings were teenagers. So they were starting their rebellious stages at that time and getting into a lot of trouble. So there was a lot of tension in the house when I was little. And I became the person who wanted to make sure my parents didn't get angry at me too. So I was comparing myself with teenagers at kindergarten. And so what I picked up on, and this, that's not in the book, but I mean, it brings those things out. But so type 9 is the type that wants to avoid conflict.
It's called the peacemaker.
The peacemaker.
The quick description says pleasant, laid back, and accommodating. They are motivated by a need to keep the peace, merge with others, and avoid conflict.
Now, that's where it was hard for me to pick type 9, because the other one that I wanted to pick, and let me see if I have my notes on that.
I know this is one of those books, when you read it, you will definitely need a pen or pencil nearby. You will dog ear lots of pages, jot notes in the margins. I don't feel like this is a book that you'll read and then give to somebody else to read, because it'll have you all over it.
You know what? I'm going to go into the number I picked, and then I'll tell you the number that I thought I was close to. But
perfect.
So 9 again is the peacemaker.
I've got a similar situation,
because the problem was when I hear about I avoid conflict, it's like, well, there are times where I'm very vocal about my opinion. And so I thought I was confused by that. But when it goes down to the core, like in my personal relationships, that's what I thought about. And this is like, no, I've had heated arguments with every one of my girlfriends. But then I realized, okay, I'm born in anger, and I will keep my mouth shut until I get to the point of a boiling point, right? So I do try to keep the peace without realizing I was keeping the peace, when I should have spoken my own voice from the start of something being wrong, right? I am uncomfortable with giving my opinion at first. So that's something that, again, I built a career on having an opinion, but I think there's a reason I built a career on having an opinion, because I'm not good at expressing it in my personal life. So yeah, go ahead, Jen.
I was going to say, and in that peacemaker profile, I paid attention to that one closely, because I thought of someone important in my life that is a type 9, but there is that resentment that comes up from being a peacemaker.
Yes.
And I think that that's where a lot of times, as your friend that's known you 20 years, I have seen that. You keep the peace, keep the peace, keep the peace, keep the peace, explode.
And then I'm a fucking bitch. I mean, we're not, FCC does not regulate podcasts. Sorry. But I am.
That is so shocking to me to curse, because I'm like so trained for the radio. I'm like, oh, you can't say that, Melissa Carter. We're going to get fired.
Delay, hit the delay.
I know.
That's right.
But it's true that like I have witnessed that happen in your life, not only in your personal relationships, but also sometimes at work too. You're like, I'm gonna bite my tongue. I'm gonna bite my tongue. I'm gonna bite my tongue. And after the 10th offensive thing is said, you go for it because you're just so sick of keeping it in.
Right. And we were in a dynamic when we were on a morning show together where that was the game with me, right? That our co-hosts would like to pick at me and pick at me and pick at me until I exploded, because that made for good radio, right? And it just tapped right into this personality. But I'm gonna read some things I highlighted.
Perfect.
Again, for type 9. They are willing to stand up for justice on behalf of others, but would not likely risk doing much to stand up for themselves. That fits me to a T. I remember as a child when Millie Pete would make me a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, which was one of my favorites. And then as I got older, I tried to make my own. They're the same exact sandwich, but in my mind, I thought Mom's tasted better. Like I got to the point where anything that I did not value as much as somebody else doing it. And I've had to reconcile that for most of my adult life. Nines fear that expressing their preferences or asserting their agenda will put important relationships at risk and upset the calm surface of their inner sea. And that's me too, where I will absorb, like you said, both professionally and personally, I will absorb something because I just don't want, I'd rather just it not be a conflict. And there's a part of me that feels like I will lose some respect if I express myself, where the opposite is likely true. We often grew up feeling like neither their presence nor priorities mattered much to others. And so that goes back to,
birth order.
My birth order. I don't think my parents intended for me to feel that way. I think the birth order and the fact that I was so far behind my siblings that I just, because they had so much to deal with these teenagers, that young, shy, compliant Melissa, who did everything that was asked of her. I followed the rules. I'm a big rule follower. That they didn't have to pay attention to me because I didn't need correcting. But I think what they failed at, which is we've talked about on the show before, is as parents, is to reinforce what I was doing. Right. So I think it was the feeling of being dismissed where, they were only expressing correction at that time when they should have been reinforcing the fact, sit me down and say, we really appreciate the fact that you were doing what you need to be doing. I'm sure they thought it, but they didn't express it. Nines forget their opinions, preferences, and priorities. In my personal life, that's an absolute. I will take on the interest of other people. I became a huge NASCAR fan because Katie Jo was a NASCAR fan. Haven't watched a race since we broke up.
Right.
I had a girlfriend years ago who was into clocks. She collected these, antique clocks. I was all about clocks and watches and gears and stuff. Didn't care about it after we broke up. So I'm that annoying person who takes up your personality.
But I think it's more about being a peacemaker, and it's more about putting the needs of others first. So on the positive side of 9 is that 9s are very selfless and care about others tremendously.
Yeah, I will. I mean, in a safe space, in a healthy relationship, I'm very dedicated and very thoughtful, and my gifts are thoughtful. I don't do anything generic, and again, I'm loyal. Yeah, I'm not the person you have to worry about cheating on you. 9s drop their healthy boundaries to fuse with a more assertive partner. Amen, sister. Jenn, yes. That's who I've been attracted to, whom they idealize and from whom they hope to glean a sense of identity and purpose. So I have always been attracted to more aggressive personalities.
And this Enneagram's hard to admit to, isn't it? When I was reading some of mine, I was like, ugh, it's cringeworthy at times, because when you get real honest with yourself as you're reading this, you're like, yeah. But it's this cool path to self-discovery. Tell me some more things that jumped out at you.
I don't want to, go too far and bore anybody, but, approachable and diplomatic. This person must be able to get along with a wide range of people. And that's the truth. I mean, I find that as a strength. Where I remember in high school that, somehow in Columbia Central High School back in the 80s, the lunchroom was segregated. It wasn't meant to be, but people just gravitated to their race and gravitated to their class. And I remember being one of the few students that could literally go and sit at every table and have people happy that I was sitting there. Like because I talked to everybody and became friends with everybody. And I didn't care what neighborhood you lived in or what color your skin was. You know, even though I lived in the rich neighborhood, and we happened to live in the rich neighborhood and hung out with the rich kids, but that was not something that I preferred sometimes to hang out with the other kids. And I've had people mention that to me years later, and I still do that in my life now, where my friend group is richly diverse in age, in race, in class. And I still do that.
Men, women,
Women,
all of the
straight,
above.
gay. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't only hang out with lesbians.
Right.
You know,
Like
nines are
some
not.
of your best friends are straight guys.
Yes. Yes. That's
Which
true.
is so cool.
Yes, they are. And I even, sometimes in text, I'm like, okay, that's too much, because sometimes they overshare. That's okay. And then, just one more thing. Nines are not initiators, but they're thrilled when others reach out to them. So, and this is something that I'm sure Jenn has experienced with me too, and everybody else. This is one of my biggest probably faults. They have a wonderful ability to reconnect with people whom they haven't run into in a long time. Again, I'm not going to initiate that reconnection, but once it's there, even years after not seeing a person, a nine can pick up the conversation as if it had only been yesterday when they last saw you. So it's never awkward with me, but I'm not the one that will make sure that we talk consistently.
There's a list in this book. Again, it's called The Road Back to You, that says what it's like to be a 9. And this one, I think, sounds like you too.
Okay.
It says, I have a hard time getting started, but once I do, I really get things done.
Yes, that is true. It goes back to that initiation. And
that's what I was thinking, because you and I have talked about doing a podcast for forever, but until I sat in the driveway during this pandemic, we were more than 10 feet apart. We were wearing our masks, but I was like, dang it, we need to do this. And you were like, okay. And then you become a boss lady and get everything done.
And then and then I'm laughing because that conversation we had in my driveway took you 3 months to talk me into doing it, because I was hunkered down. You're like, when you feel comfortable coming out of the house, I will drive over to you and I will sit in your driveway. And I'm like, all right, let me think about it. And and that's the other thing with nines too, is the decision making. So a lot of times people get frustrated with nines because they don't make decisions quickly. And to the point of this improving your relationships with people, is one of those things, like one of the authors of the book talk about how he and his wife did this, and now their relationship is better. They communicate better, because again, if I'm a 9 and I don't make decisions very well, and that I'm apt to just latch on to you and your interests, then you may not be so aggressive with that, like you may ask me about what I want more, and just kind of get it out of me. Not that it's your responsibility to, but it's just one of those things where if you know a personality type, then it helps. So yes, the peacemaker is who I am. The other number, just really quickly, and I already forgot what you said you were. What'd you say you are? What's your number?
I am a 1.
All right. So that's the other one that I looked at. Okay.
So you could be, they talk about how there's wings, like you could be partly the number that's next to you. So if you're a 9, what are the ones on the other side of you? You could be a 9 with a 1 wing.
Well, it sounds like that. And again, with Enneagram, it's almost like a circle with lines, kind of crossing between. Yeah, that Jenn on YouTube is showing this, that's crossing to different numbers, because much like if you've had your star chart done, there's a lot of things that connect with each other. It's not just black and white. But I want to talk about the 1. I want you to go ahead and talk about being a perfectionist, because that's what the 1 is. But I did look at that because I think that I am naturally a 9, but once I get into bitch mode, then I'm a 1, because that's when I start trying to, and for me, I'm not saying that's what you do, but 1 is my go-to when I'm feeling unsafe. When I feel threatened or unsafe, I become a 1. So tell us about the 1, my love.
Interesting. Okay. Well, this is where you gotta just dig deep and go ahead and admit who you are. Okay, one is called the perfectionist. It's ethical, dedicated, and reliable. They're motivated by a desire to live the right way, improve the world, and avoid fault and blame. And so, yes, I did find that of all the different personality types, and let me just go ahead and list them really quickly. And
Sure,
you might,
sure.
as you hear this list, you might identify with just the title of it, and you might
Yeah.
want to dig deeper and read one of these books. And find what your type is. Type 1 is the perfectionist. Type 2, the helper. Type 3, the performer. Type 4, the romantic. Type 5, the investigator. Type 6, the loyalist. Type 7, the enthusiast. Type 8, the challenger. And type 9, Melissa, the peacemaker.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just a quick name of each one. And I identified with a couple of different ones. So
and let me
think
just
this
really
is like
quickly.
gonna be like just the first book that I read about this because I want to dive way deep.
Well, let me just jump in really quickly and let you know if you have not subscribed to the Friendzy, really quickly, we send out a newsletter and deliver an episode to you. And within that newsletter was the link to this book. And so we make it very easy for you if you're someone who doesn't have the time to go find the platform and go find the book and we send you a newsletter explaining the episode and having those links. And we also have the link on the YouTube channel. So just know that we can make your life easier just by subscribing to the Friendzy at thefriendzy.com. Okay. Perfectionist,
Yes.
continue.
I'm also in the anger triad, which is interesting, right?
Mm-hmm.
That you and I both are there and that we might be like really close to each other. But being a perfectionist, all these things I identified with, except for a couple. People have told me I can be overly critical and judgmental. Check. I beat myself up when I make mistakes. Check. I don't feel comfortable when I try to relax. There's too much to be done. Check.
Check. I fuss at Jen about that all the time.
Yeah. Details are important to me. Check. I often find I'm comparing myself to others. Check. If I say I'll do it, I'll do it. Right. So what's interesting is in the perfectionist type, it's that we see that there's a lot wrong in the world and we are put here to fix it. And I don't honestly know where it comes from. Like, it was interesting to hear you talk about being a type 9 and knowing directly that it came from your childhood. I just know that I was born this way because I started thinking about the perfectionist, where we have, like they say, we always have a concern for fairness and justice for others. And that if you take a healthy perfectionist, a healthy type 1, and apply them towards a cause, look out, world, because that cause is going to change. The world will change, right? The world will move in that direction if a perfectionist dives that energy into something worthwhile, and something on behalf of others. So I really identified with that because I felt that passion early on. Did I ever tell you that in high school, I had a rainbow flag on my car?
No, I didn't.
This
You
is
never
in
told
high
me that. I
school.
didn't know that.
Nobody had rainbow flags. Nobody, but I knew that I had a dear friend in high school, a couple dear friends that were gay and were figuring that out and coming out. And I just immediately was like, well, I'm putting that on my car,
I love that because in high school I had a Confederate flag on my car because I didn't know better. But anyway, go ahead.
Lord help me, Melissa Carter.
Probably something I shouldn't have said, but it's the truth.
Wow. Well, raised in Tennessee, we're sort of a product of our environment.
Small
sometimes.
town. That's exactly right.
But yeah, I mean, I've always been in high school. I also really got behind the World Peace Organization that was trying to save the whales. What was that one? Oh, I was diehard on there.
Yeah.
So anything about injustice bothers me, and I feel very convicted immediately to fight injustice. The other part of me that has happened since I was a child is feeling like everything had to be organized and right. And that's why I said I think I missed my calling as a professional organizer. I really did. I would have been the best at that. But I was remembering from my childhood.
I'm happy to hire you. Go ahead.
When I'll come over tomorrow. When my little brother had a birthday party, he was probably 4 or 5, which means I was like 7 or 8. My mom says that it stressed me out so bad because the kids did not follow the rules. They did not play the games like they were supposed to. They were sticky and messy and running around like crazy 5-year-old. And it stressed me out that I just sat there and cried. Like I could not handle the disorganization of the birthday party. Okay. Fast forward to my adult life. When my husband and I sold our home and we're getting into our new home, there was a delay of about a month or so. And we moved in with my brother-in-law and sister-in-law. They are clearly not type ones. Okay. And
I remember this. Yes.
took it upon myself to quote unquote help them. I cleaned out the refrigerator. I cleaned out the freezer. I cleaned out the pantry. I reorganized the pots and pans because I was doing some cooking. So it was for me to be able to cook for them.
How long before they had kicked you out? Just kidding.
Soon thereafter. Yeah, I know it bothered them. But I could not help myself. I'm like, but if they just arrange it this way, their life will be better and easier. And as a type 1 perfectionist, I can't help myself but do that. And I have to dial that. That was me being an unhealthy one. Okay.
Well, and I wanted to say that because I think that, and part of the purpose of this is to make your life easier on yourself. So as much as you're a perfectionist of your little brother's friends, which is hilarious, the fact that your future son-in-laws will be like, really? And Reese and Lauren be like, it's just mom, just go with it. Yeah. But the fact that you're as hard on yourself, you're so self-critical.
Yeah.
That's where it can harm you. And just like with me, this feeling that I don't belong, which has been a permeating, it doesn't have anything to do with me being gay. It doesn't have to, it's just this, my personality has always been geared toward, I don't belong anywhere. I don't feel connected to any place. Wow. So for you, that, I mean, the critical of somebody else, again, you're doing it 3 times as worse to yourself when you're being unhealthy.
Exactly. That is the thing, is that you can be so self-critical, and that inner critic, that voice never shuts up. So what's been so cool about reading this book is it gives you strategies for acknowledging that inner voice, saying, thank you, but go away. You helped me survive a lot of things, but now it's time to go away. And I realize I feel very uncomfortable when I don't have a project or a mission or something to fix or something to take care of. It says one's deadly sin is what it talks about. Each one's deadly sin.
Yep.
It says one's perceive a world rife with errors and feel a bounden duty to correct it. There's no shortage of work to be done. And this was so funny because I identified with each and every one. Someone squeezed the toothpaste tube from the middle. Oh, don't even come near me with that. Right. One of the kids didn't fold or hang their bath towel correctly. I mean, it goes through all these things and I'm like, this is me. I do this every day.
Now, to make you feel better, like the other thing this book does, it gives you famous people who share your number, and like you share a number with Nelson Mandela and Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
Not too shabby. I mean, it goes back to that when you're in a healthy state as a 1, you literally change the world.
Yes. And so I'm trying to get to a healthy state. Sometimes I just adjust the bath towels and scrub the kitchen counters and get everything perfectly organized.
I've seen your character in movies before.
Really?
Usually Shirley MacLaine usually portrays. No, I'm just kidding.
A type 1.
I'm just kidding.
If we go, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say at some point I'd love to go toward the end of each chapter, because each chapter, like Jenn said, gives you an explanation, shows you kind of your weaknesses, and then shows how a relationship can be strengthened. Knowing your number. So at some point,
let's do that. Let's go to those 10 paths to transformation for 9s.
All right. So
that's 88.
Yeah. So one of the things it says right before that is, the healing message that 9s need to hear is, we see you and your life matters. And when I read that, I think I cried, that sentence. And it for a lot of people who don't feel or aren't 9s or don't feel that way, it may seem so trivial, but that is truly the theme of my life, is trying to find something where I feel like I matter. And so and I can tell you, none of my girlfriends ever said those words to me. I know they felt it. I don't have evil girlfriends, but I have always been attracted to the more aggressive ones who kind of did their thing. And the problem with nines is you become the doormat. I became a doormat. That's the
Mhm.
9 is a doormat number. Don't say that in the book, but I'm going to tell you now, 9 is a doormat number, because if you lose yourself into the person, just do for them and do for them, then they're going to run you over. And I have seen that many times where I've been attracted to women that just were not good for me. But the 10 paths of transformation for me, one of the things it says is to journal. I need to journal the question, what is my calling or life's program? Am I pursuing it or postponing it simply to keep the peace? Because
Mm.
that's how I stand in my own way, is by trying to keep the peace. And keeping the peace, again, if you relate to the 9, is not that you're necessarily going to have this big argument. It's the inner turmoil for me
Mhm.
is what I translate that into, that you're trying to keep the peace within yourself, because it's very uncomfortable for us to express our needs. It
Mhm.
is very uncomfortable even with my 6-year-old son. I find, one of the things that this helps with is I find I do the same thing with him, that I
Mhm.
will not say anything if he forgets to do this or that. And I try to correct him and, remind him to pick up after himself and to do for himself. And then then it hits me and I get just enraged. And it's like, I go into, there's been 2 times and I hear myself saying, I'm like, what are you doing? But it is I'm doing everything. I don't have anybody here to help me because I'm a single mom. And I'm going, and I'm like, as I'm saying, I'm like, this is not something that he needs to absorb. This is not his guilt. It's not his fault.
Mhm.
But that's where the relationships aren't successful for me, is because we can't survive when I go into bitch mode, because it is confusing for the person on the other end, because they didn't see the resentment build. They all of a sudden
Mhm.
everything's fine, and then all of a sudden Melissa's at me and I don't understand. And so I'm trying to keep from doing that with my son.
Mhm. I like this part for a transformation for nines. It says, realize that your tendency to merge with others can be a beautiful gift if directed toward God. Other types envy this spiritual advantage you have, but don't fuse with another person and miss out on the chance to become your own person.
Mhm.
Does that resonate?
Absolutely. I
Yeah.
think that, and I've said this on the show before, that the Frenzies helped me to reflect upon my radio career, and there were so many things that I portrayed as better than they were on the show. And that's why I think I went over into the perfection, wing a little bit, is that if things in my life, I didn't exaggerate too much, but I exaggerated enough to where it wasn't that I cared about what other people thought. It wasn't that I thought, oh, well, people need to see that my life is perfect. It is, I needed to see my life was better than it was, which
Mhm.
is a different motivation. So it wasn't the audience that would, it was me. If I was talking about my relationships or talking about, I portrayed them better than they were. Now, my relationship with my mother, I didn't exaggerate. We just did a
Mhm.
Mother's Day show, and that
I
was,
also think there's an angle to that is a public facing job. You know,
yeah,
I think a
true.
lot of people in a public facing position paint their life better than what the reality is.
And I think people are realizing with social media a little
Oh,
bit of
yeah.
what we've done with our career. I mean, that's been our career for decades,
Yeah.
is to have to be present every day in the public eye and live in the public eye and then absorb the judgment of the public eye.
It's
And
exhausting.
and yeah, and you see these people like, I am announcing I am off Facebook today. And I and I laugh every time, because I thought, honey, you're not off
Mm.
Facebook
Yeah.
today. You lost your temper. You're
Yeah.
making a big dramatic scene, and there's no reason to do that, because you chose to be in media, on social media. You chose to be here. And so you got to take the good with the bad. And that's what you and I have done for a long. Yeah, I laugh every time somebody boycotts social media. It's because, like, honey, you can't handle it then.
Yeah.
You shouldn't be here.
Yeah. If it takes an announcement for you to get the reaction out of it, you're going to be back for more reaction.
Hmm.
Right.
And yes. And then one last thing on the peacemaker and the transformation for nines, then we'll get to ones.
Yeah.
that resonated with me was remember that what feels like an intense, terrible conflict to you might just be a typical disagreement for somebody else. Take a breath and engage. So again, we avoid conflict because we don't like how we feel, and we're very sensitive to. And so, I'll give Katie Jo's an example. There was a lot of time, and she and I get along very well. We co-parent, so there's no conflict there. But I can tell you that when we were together, one of the things she would always say in frustration was, "Our biggest problem is miscommunication." Our biggest problem is miscommunication, because again, it was that very thing where I thought that any conflict was this world war, and she just misunderstood something. And to her, it was no big deal. It was just like, uh, pouring a glass of bad milk, just pour it out and get a new milk. Like, it's no big deal. And we would have these fights, and obviously our relationship didn't survive it, but we would have these fights. And at the end, when we realized that we felt the same way about something, but we had just fought about it for an hour, then she would be like, "Our biggest problem is miscommunication," because it was like there was no purpose to fight, but it was her lack of sensitivity, because that's usually what I'm attracted to, is people who have a lack of sensitivity, and my intense sensitivity that don't merge. And I've said this before, that I am reluctant to get back into relationships because I don't trust my own instinct because of those things. But this may help to where, like you read, that it's a beautiful situation if I'm with somebody who's right for me and our focus is in the right place, that merging is not something that I should be afraid of. And that's exactly where I am. I'm afraid of going through that again, because to me, it's like, I'd rather be single than to deal with that trauma again. But that's not the way fear is not the way to live. And so I have to get back in the saddle at some point.
Okay, so I think you are definitely a 9 with a 1 wing.
A 1 wing.
Okay, a 1 wing. 9s with a 1 wing have a strong sense of the difference between right and wrong. That is so you, Melissa Carter, and anybody that ever listened to you on the radio knows that, right?
Yeah.
1 energy helps these 9s stay a little more focused. They are able to accomplish more, which enhances their confidence. It says the 9 1 wings are more critical, orderly, introverted, and passive aggressive than other 9s. Because of their concerns about matters of right and wrong, they're apt to be involved in peacemaking efforts or other social justice causes. Hello, Human Rights Campaign and Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms Committee. Okay. These 9s are principled and modest as leaders. And this one is so you. People want to follow them because of their integrity and steadfastness. Amen. That is Melissa Carter to a T.
But isn't that funny? Isn't that funny how
I'm writing it in the margin? I'm circling it and writing it right now. Melissa. 9
but
with
isn't
1
it?
wing.
But the funny thing is, and we'll find this with you too, where I that's what has gotten me through, is this knowledge that people are attracted to whatever message I have, because Melissa is learning to be as attracted to her own message, meaning I'm incredibly insecure. I'm an incredibly insecure person that is, I mean, I'm telling you, it's been a lifelong struggle. And now I'm more confident in many areas, but that personal life thing, that relationship thing is still a thorn.
She's out there. She's out there. We're going to find her.
But let's talk about 1s, because again, it goes back to how more people probably admire you than you admire yourself.
Yeah, because I've got that inner critic.
Yeah.
That is going on and on. Okay, so what are we doing with type 1s? You want me to read the transformational things that I need to do?
So let's talk about you in relationships. Let's talk about how maybe, has this enlightened you in any way in your relationship with Grant?
Yeah, because I'm critical. It definitely has helped me see that we're not coming from the same personality type or point of view. So sometimes the thing that I am critical of myself on, and then in turn critical of him about, it's just not the way he thinks. So I think that it will help. This is all still sinking in. And I think that's what's cool about the Enneagram, is that it takes a little while to permeate and process.
It can be, how do I put it? it can be a quick read if you are attracted, if you find it, the number it jumps out at you immediately, right? So for me, the 9 and the 1 pretty much jumped out. So I didn't study the other numbers because I knew I had found my place. And so once you're able to dive into your number, then you can really, like you said, let it sink in, kind of reflect on it, look at these, suggestions again.
And I think that Grant is a personality type 8, the challenger, and I think Katie Jo is too.
I didn't even look at. I need to read that up.
Honey, you just dive right on in because you're going to read the list and be like, "Yep."
Well, because again,
yep.
we said before we had our son, before we broke up, when we were still together, do you want to have a child with me? Because that person's in your life the rest of your life. I mean, it's not when your child turns 18. Like Katie Jo and I are going to be with each other as family, connected in some level until one of us passes. So I'd probably need to read that up because that's why I bring her up a lot because she is the mother of my son. And that's one of those things. Yeah. That be careful who you have children with because they're always a part of you. And
Forever.
That dynamic, that relationship dynamic is still there. We still have miscommunication. So I
think when you read her type, you'll get her better. I already feel like I get Grant better.
Okay. Good.
So spiritual transformation for me, the perfectionist, it says you believe the only way you'll know peace on the inside is if you perfect everything on the outside. It's not true. That tranquility only comes when you surrender your compulsive need for perfection and stop stifling your emotions, particularly your anger. So that's where you and I are in the same anger triad. And it says ones need to hear a quote from Brene Brown, which is why I love her so much. And I've read all of her books and I can't get enough of her podcasts and everything else. She said, because she speaks right to the heart of a 1, right? She says, you're imperfect and you're wired for struggle, but you are worthy of love and belonging. That's it.
It's true.
And it's so easy for somebody else of another personality to type to hear that, right?
Right.
Probably no big deal to you. You're like, yeah, duh, obvi. And
but when
for me,
yourself,
that's not obvious.
Right.
At all.
Well, what's interesting to me too is and the reason I was able to connect with, because I've been struggling and thinking about my upbringing a lot since my mother's death. So my mother started to decline about 6 months before her death. And I knew that was it. And so for the past year and in the pandemic and her death and everything. So I was already primed to reflect on this because I had been reflecting on it at the loss of my mother and how I was raised and what resentment I had even toward her and what I needed to let go of now that I'm a mother and I don't want to pass on to my child. But in your case, like you said, this has been your personality from the start without like a source of something, like it wasn't a reaction to something. So
I'm sure there is a source of something, but I mean, as early as I can remember, I've been perfecting things. I used to come home from trick-or-treating and organize my candy. Not kidding. I would count it and organize it and group the Tootsie Rolls together and group the Snickers together and set aside the ones that I wanted to save for later. And I mean, that's innate somewhere in there.
And
I don't think anybody caused that.
Here's behind the scenes. So when we're planning the Friendzy and the things around the Friendzy and the things we're going to do that we'll share with you as the episodes continue, Miss Hobby is like the list. Like it's the list. So we always go by the list. Like we've got to get through the list before before we can move on to something else, which I respect and I appreciate because there is a part of me, again, when I'm not feeling confident, I truly am a dual personality sometimes. My again, personal, I have allowed to kind of I need to merge them back together. But I do lean toward the 1. So when I'm not feeling good, I do tasks and I do organizing of things. So I touch upon it, not my house, but like different projects. And so I respect it, but it's not for me. It's every now and again. For Miss Hobby, it's law. And
it's wired. It's wired that way. I will say if I'm regularly exercising, I mellow on it. So there's something about exercise that mellows my compulsive need to fix everything.
Well, that's that anger base. And when you read The Road Back to You, it talks about the three of the numbers are anger based, and it's based in this either anger that the world is not what it needs to be, anger that my life was not what it was supposed to be, or anger like for nines, the resentment is that I'm being passed over. Like in relationships, I'm getting I'm quick to anger if I notice that you're not respecting me, if you're not, it's it's a struggle that it's hard. So like you said, for one, that's the thing about it is like it's a thick jungle is what it feels like. I feel like I'm getting through the brush of this because
Yeah.
I still now if something is with like for instance like with Mr. Carter, he does remote learning still and he's at either grandma's house or my house. And there was something that grandma either didn't have organized correctly, forgot. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, she didn't mean that. She works very hard in helping with that raising that child. And I remember getting so pissed. I sat there so mad. And in my mind, I thought, Melissa, why are you mad? Because my first instinct is, well, they did it on purpose and they're trying to make my life harder. And she didn't
Right.
think
You're
twice
like,
about it.
"Mm-mm, no."
And that's what
Yeah.
and relationships are hard for me that way because that's my unfortunately, that I've allowed that to be my go-to, that if I feel slighted in the least, it is World War III when it shouldn't
Yeah.
be.
Do you feel like any lifestyle changes, like I was saying about exercise, like help that? Or
Yes.
like if you're eating well and you're exercising and all those other things, then
I'm
the
as
anger does.
relaxed and zen and cool. I'm the peacemaker. I'm the one that,
Yeah.
I could put
Yeah.
on Jamaican clothes and just be
Let's
somebody
go
who's
along
like,
to get
yeah,
along.
go along,
Yeah.
get along.
Yeah.
But if it's that pendulum of insecurity and security, and you find that it's really up to you. I mean, we talk about this on the show all the time, but all of this is still about you. You're learning about you so that you're responsible for you. You can't rely on other
Right.
people. And I'm the worst about relying on other people in my personal life to make even socially. I
Mhm.
relied on Katie for my social life. Um, and I have to pick up that slack, and because it's either I'm lonely when I'm single or and I'm thinking, oh, well, it'd be nice to be with somebody, be out in restaurants and go to concerts. And I'm like, well, Melissa, why can't you do that by yourself? Or why can't you initiate that? But again, it goes back to that. I don't initiate. It's hard for me to make a decision, and I rely on other people for that. And in the book, his wife is a 9, and he talks about how he's changed his behavior to allow
Mhm.
her more freedom to be comfortable in expressing herself, which I appreciated. And I thought, well, that's how you improve your relationship. If you both know your number and try to work it out with each other, then I do think it would help.
Yeah,
I do
that's
think it
what
would
I was
help you and
thinking
Grant.
with you and me, though, as our friendship
Yep.
grows and becomes deeper, and as we're working together more regularly, understanding that you're a 9, I can adjust now. And as a
Hmm.
1, I can, beat myself internally critically if I don't do this. No, I'm kidding. But I will, I can say, well, Melissa, what do you want to do? I want to hear
Hmm.
your opinion first so that I don't give my opinion and then you just go with it.
Right.
Because as the peacemaker, I know you're going to kind of just go
And
with it.
there have been times with the Friendzy where I did not have any kind of opinion about it, but there have been times where, you know, Jenn has, you have made a decision. I mean, we always check with each other. So there's never a
Yeah.
time where we don't, but it's like there are times where in my mind, it's not that I'm critical of you, it's I'm critical of me saying, well, you probably should have at least given some feedback. In my mind, I'm thinking
Yeah.
you got to, you can't get in the habit of even allowing Jenn to just assume you don't care. And, which again, you don't have this idea in you're not
Right.
thinking twice about me in your mind. But in my mind, I'm spinning my wheels about this. And at the same
Right.
time, now knowing that you're spinning your wheels about, and I know you to be critical, but I mean, I find it cute because I can see your struggle with it. Like,
Mhm.
Jenn is not somebody that sits and gossips about people. That's not what we're talking about. It's just like in certain situations, you are perfectionist, so you want, and so I know that I've already subconsciously made sure to communicate with you to make sure that I'm not in the crosshairs of that,
Mhm.
right? And it's not that I need, but it's in a loving way where I know that's how you are. So I don't want you to feel stress about me, and so being sensitive to the fact that you're geared toward that, I have already, and I will make a bigger effort to make sure that you never have to feel the need to do that with me. Does that make sense?
Well, and you now know that inner critic is way louder for myself than it
Yes.
is for
And I've
anybody
always known
else.
that, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So interesting. Okay. Some 10 paths to transformation for ones.
Yes.
Okay. I should say that differently because I'm not going to read all 10. Paths to transformation for ones.
Mhm.
It says to awaken self-compassion, try to capture in a journal the typical things your inner critic says to you and then read them out loud.
Oof.
Or what? I was like, no, I don't want to do that.
Because
That is
it's
so
going to be,
good.
because it's on, it can be an inner bully. It can be a bully. You'll find in that journaling that you're bullying yourself without
Right.
realizing it.
This one, resist the urge to give other people to-do lists or to redo their tasks if you think they haven't met your standards. Instead, and this is good for my marriage, instead, catch the people you love doing things right and tell them how much you appreciate them for it. And that's something that I have to get better at, is when my husband does things that are great, I need to say they're great and not just expect him to correct the things that aren't so great.
Right.
That
Well,
I perceive as not so great, but that's just not how he lives. That's not where he's coming from.
I think it's intense for ones, but that's probably advice that everybody could take, because I think that we naturally try to fix things because that's what
Mhm.
we're taught to do, and take the things that are going well for granted. And so that's just a lesson in recognizing the good. And I know that's hard for you, though. I know that's hard
Mhm.
because you're literally
Yeah.
biting your tongue. I know that, And so what's so funny is, Jen and I've been close for a long time, and there have been times where we didn't talk for a long time because Melissa didn't initiate anything and Jen was busy, and we just step right back into the fold of how we are. But in the process of knowing you for 20 years, has it been 20? It's almost
I
20,
think
right?
it's 20.
Um, I think
Actually,
we
it's definitely 20 by now.
I think we've picked up on so what's interesting about my relationship with you is that I think we already had an understanding of each other, and maybe it's because that anger based triad that we're a part of,
Mhm.
but there's been a subconscious understanding of each other, because Jen and I've never had tense words. We've never had an argument. We've never
Mhm.
had, and it's just natural that way, because I think because you've always asked how I was doing and how I feel and what I think, and I've always, tried to tell you to, it's okay. It's going to be okay. Relax. Like, you don't over schedule yourself. Don't,
Yes, you've always been such an encourager on that. Is like, chill out, just relax. It'll
yes,
unfold. Like, you don't have to figure it all out yourself.
because when you get advice from Jen Hobby in your personal life, it is very zen. It is very wise, and it goes back to that positive aspect of the one where you are able to change the world. It's not that you want to change the world, but you have the ability to, and the wisdom to change the world. And so when you get advice from Jen Hobby, it's very impactful. Like, it's not, she doesn't dismiss you. It's very impactful advice. And so that's why when I tell you to relax and don't over
Mhm.
schedule and put yourself in a position of, again, being critical and pressed against the clock and having to do things imperfectly, because that's what happens. That's what unravels you, is when you overschedule yourself, then you don't get a chance to be perfect at everything, that you
Mhm.
have to let some things slide, and that really bothers you, and you never have peace with that. But yeah, I mean, but we have been doing that practice for 20 years without realizing what we were doing for each other, right? And now we have language to describe that.
Right.
And when Jen tries to be Cupid for me with a new girlfriend, she's gonna send her this book and say, "Will you please tell us what your number is,
Yeah, you
because you
need to
need to
read.
you need to
I'm gonna
be the
give you
right."
a little homework
You
before
don't need
date number 2.
you don't need to be an 8, is what I'm hearing. Is you don't If you say you're an 8, then you're out.
Could be a
So,
healthy 8. I'm married to a healthy 8. Okay, let's see. So I was going to also ask you what you think my wing is, because I can either be a 1 with a 2 wing or a 1 with a 9 wing, which is maybe how we intersect.
oh wait, here we go. The helper.
Yes. I don't think I'm the helper. Um, I know people who are, but I don't think I'm the helper. I think my
Yeah, well, you may be a 9.
is the 9 wing, because it says ones with a 9 wing tend to be more introverted. That's not me though. Detached and relaxed, more idealistic and objective. They're often more circumspect, thinking before they speak to avoid saying something wrong or erroneous. That's definitely me. They pause before finishing a thought. I even listen back to the Friendzy podcast and I'm like, spit it out, Jenn. But sometimes I have to pause before finishing my thought because I don't want to say it wrong. It says
you take a lot more notes than I do. You take a lot more notes for what to say on the show than I do, which I think again is you are
thinking it through, and
you are more of a you think like so. One of the things that when we talk about the Friendzy, another behind the scenes thing about Jenn is if we're making a decision on something that we're going to change or do, or we're going to launch, even when it came to the name of the show, I was agreeable and passionate about certain, but Jenn was like, let's sleep on it. Let's sleep on it, talk tomorrow. And there's many times in our relationship with this podcast in particular where you've said, let's sleep on it. And I appreciate that because I tend to not do that. But you need to think through it. And I rely on your ability to do that and your keen sense of research, which I don't have. I'm more of a instinctual person, which is not always correct. But I appreciate that in you. So I do think you're a 9 wing because because again, these numbers aren't perfect. There are some things that I don't agree with in the 9. I am more introverted. You are not. So that's what makes me a 9. And that's my personality. That's I have somehow evolved into a public career where I enjoy public speaking and I like being on the show but as a child, like I was painfully shy and my natural instinct, which has disappointed a lot of women who wanted to date me because I was the radio personality, that when they got with me, it's like a date was not, I didn't take them to the VIP access places. I didn't take them to the big clubs. I didn't do all those things.
You're more comfortable at home.
I'm fine to cook dinner at home and watch a movie. And that disappointed women who I dated. There was one that even said that I'm surprised. This is not what I expected. I think was her words.
You're like, then bye.
Yeah. And I'm like, well, that's who I am. And I may not be the typical radio personality that I don't take advantage of all the situations I've been a part of in that way. But anyway, I think that, and that's maybe why we connect, because our wing numbers are each other's prime numbers.
Yes. That's what I was thinking. That's so cool. Okay. Yeah. I'm going to read about 4,000 more books about this and I'll be back to you with my results. No, I did want to mention that when I was asking and kind of surveying our audience, the Friendzy audience, and asking on social media which book to read, this was the one that came up the most, The Road Back to You. And I also liked it because this author is also an Episcopal priest. And so he drives this conversation spiritually. So I just wanted to mention that if you are interested in the Enneagram and you are also a Christian person and this kind of freaks you out because you think it's some sort of odd voodoo, this is written by an Episcopal priest.
And he addresses that. Yes. And if you're not Christian based, it's still worth the read because the way he tells stories, again, he's telling his story, but he's not preaching. There's no preaching in this. He's just telling you, he happens to be from a Christian background and Christian trained. And that he and his wife
spiritual driven, I feel like, than it is like scripture or anything like that.
Oh, it's absolutely
spiritual driven. And he connects all these different personality types to God. And then he also connects these personality types to how they go bad. And I think it's really interesting to hear those. So Melissa, I'm going to give you your 9s. It says 9s reflects God's love of peace and desire for union with his children. Isn't that beautiful?
Well, because it says one of the things about the 9s is I truly do believe that everything is connected. I don't think anything in nature is separate, even though I feel separated from everything. Right. My philosophy is that everything from plants to animals to humans to everything is connected. Absolutely.
And then it says 9's desire to avoid conflict at all costs means that they are all too willing to accept peace at any price. So I thought that was interesting. And so it's kind of like the good side and the bad side. Okay. So for 1s, for me, it says 1s show us God's perfection and his desire to restore the world to its original goodness. Okay, which I think is really cool. Then on the other side, one's passion to improve the world goes bad when they start to believe that in order to be loved, they have to be perfect and not make
Mm.
mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
So the
Yep.
juxtaposition, and he does this for each and every one of the personality types. Clearly, we just focused today on 9s and 1s, but there are so many more. I'm married to a lovely 8, which is the challenger.
I
I
gotta
think I
read
was
that.
raised by a 9 and a loyalist, which I think is a 5
Oh
or a
gosh.
6. It's been fascinating to go through. And the other thing as moms, because I know a lot of our Friendzy audience members are mothers, is to think about who your children are.
Yeah.
And I don't know that their numbers are fully formed in childhood yet, but you can pick up a tendency right away on their
Mhm.
personality type. And then I think you can actually parent them better.
So did you find a number for Lauren and Reese in there yet?
I'm still searching Lauren's. She's a complicated one, but I think she might have a 1. I think she might be a 1 like me.
Mhm.
Um, but she could be somewhere between a 1 and a 9.
Mhm.
And so that, reminds me not to be too critical and turn her into a psycho-perfectionist like me. And Reese is an enthusiast. She's a number 7. She's gonna be my wild child trying to avoid pain and find the joy in every moment. 7s are so much fun. And I've one of my best friends in the world is a 7. I'm like, "No wonder I love her so much and wanna be around her. She gets me out of myself," so
Yeah.
and, with the Enneagram, they say no personality type is better than another, and none
True.
of none of them
And
are
that
gendered.
well, and here's no gender, no sexuality, no race, no anything.
Yep.
I think that the important thing is, and that's my philosophy with life, is nobody's more important than anybody, even if
Yes.
you don't agree with them. I mean, in politics has really challenged us in that
Mhm.
mindset. But yes, this is not a judgment book. This is just trying to, like Jen said at the very beginning, if you are introspective at this age and want to kind of have more self discovery now that you're kind of discovering yourself and not caring as much as what other
Yes.
people think, then this is a tool that you can use. Yeah, with Mr. Carter, I think it's a 1 with a 9. Like he
Interesting.
I've gotten to the point where I say I don't allow the word perfect in the house. So I've said I don't like that word.
Mhm.
I'm not going to use that word. And he's like, he argues with me all the time about how things have to be perfect.
Mhm.
That's his favorite word, and I'm like, I just don't want him to be a stressed out man because
And
of
then you can
that Gen
know that
hobby.
his internal critic, just remember, is louder than anything he's saying out loud.
Yes.
So to remind him that mistakes are okay and, you
Yep.
don't have to be perfect to be loved.
That's why I banned it in my house because I'm
Yeah.
like, you're better off, and he that's a constant conversation we have because he wants everything to be perfect and he organizes and he sorts and he's a Gen hobby.
See? This is why we're friends, so you
That's
can
right.
understand your son better. It
That's
all
right.
has purpose and meaning and drive. I
That's
love
right.
it so much.
Yeah. So again, don't forget to subscribe to the Friendzy newsletter because again, we deliver these episodes and we delivered that link to that book, The Road Back to You. If you want to always have us make it easier for you, no matter what your number is, thefrenzy.com is where you can sign up and subscribe, both to the podcast and to our newsletter there at the same site.
Yes, and we want to say thank you so much to our listeners who have already subscribed to our email list at thefrenzy.com. Want to shout out 3 names: Aurora Soto de la. Thank you, Aurora. Elaine Sperling. What up, Elaine? And Bonnie Rhodes. Thank you so much for subscribing to the email list. We will not bug you. I promise. We're just going to send 1 a week with the new show and links to some other things you may want to explore.
Sounds good.
Okay, Melissa Carter has got your mirror mantra for this week.
All right. So one of the things that the Enneagram it tries to put you in touch with is your deepest fear. Okay. Because the way you improve yourself is to face that fear. And so the mantra for today is pretty simple, but it's something that I hope that you remind yourself of all week. And that is fear does not stop death, it stops life.
Wow.
Fear does not stop death, it stops life. Because if you think about it, the purpose of fear from an animal standpoint, because we are animals, even though we try to separate ourselves from nature as much as possible, is that we don't want to die. Fear is an animal instinct of surviving death. And so if a bear is running at you, yes, you have a reason to be afraid. If a snake is yes, you have reason to be afraid. There are times where it's absolutely appropriate to be afraid. But to be afraid to speak your voice is, you're not going to die if you speak your voice. To be afraid to, in my case, to tell a girlfriend how I really feel about something is, I'm not going to die if I tell her that. This idea that I need to have this peace within me, the instinct is to keep me from dying. But we have somehow in our boredom, because I do believe it's boredom, I believe that as animals, we no longer have to hunt our own food in our culture. We no longer have to fight these tribal battles. We're not, we don't have weapons at our sides all the time, afraid somebody's going to try to take our territory. And I do believe as humans in industrialized nations, we're bored. And I think that fear has to come out in other ways. And so just letting you know again, fear does not stop death. Okay. Because we're not afraid of things that actually are going to kill us. The fear that we have is going to stop us from living our full potential. And so just face your fear, whatever that fear is, and realize it's phantom. It's a phantom fear that has somehow compounded in your mind, and you're not going to die from whatever it is you're afraid of.
So good. So good. Thank you. I love that. All right. Sorry. Let me get back over here. Please subscribe to the Friendzy podcast and leave a review. It means the world to us. And like we said, you can also sign up for our weekly email. We'll send you the episode right to your inbox. And we only send one with the new show. So sign up today at thefriendzy.com. We add all the links of the things we're talking about in our newsletter. So it's easy to find all in one place.
And if there's a friend of yours who would enjoy this episode, please share this with her. And our brand new YouTube channel is live with videos and extended interviews. Some of the things that don't make the podcast, we have in the videos. And if you like this show, share about it on your social media and tag us so that we can share it as well.
We're going to skip that next part.
Sure. Soundtrack produced by Tammy Hurt for Placement Music, written and recorded by Placement Music creative team member Mark Daniels.
The Friendzy is produced by Bo Johnson, graphic design by Helen Vickers, and web design by Caden Jacobs. These are real stories by real women. And now it's time to go share yours. Thank you so much for the gift of your time. We appreciate you and hope you have a great week.
All right. Until next week, number 1.
Okay, number 9.
Trust your gut.
Share your story.
And stop lying about your age. We'll see you next week. We're getting better at that. We'll see you next week.
I think so. Good job, 9.
Hey, thanks, 1.